one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to Jill and Brett and Toby and Mike, it was to really just share some things that I actually haven't shared, because Sasquatch for me, right from the beginning, was truly a paranormal experience. It was physical and it was scientific, but it was mostly paranormal. And I was shy to talk about that a lot of times because I believe in the research, I believe in the science, and I want a forward progression in understanding who they are. And of course, the way audience is a lot of times, if you're not scientific, then you're not credible. And so I was always tiptoeing. I was always like leaving a little something like it was paranormal, but not really fully engaging that conversation. But the truth is, Sasquatch was paranormal from the beginning. I remember my first outing to look for Bigfoot. I was flying into Bozeman, and as I was flying over these mountains, something said to me, they travel through here. And I was like, what? They travel through here. And I looked down and I saw these mountains, and I'm like, what? But the truth is, I knew. I was already being talked to about them, like right away. The whole idea of me actually researching Bigfoot was, an oddity. I watched a TV show. I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I saw some credible scientific evidence to substantiate their existence. And once the idea got in my head that they could be real, like, my life changed. Like, that day, I sat there after I watched that show, and I just kind of shook my head. I just kept shaking my head. And then I ran to my computer, and everything from that moment on was about Bigfoot. I couldn't stop talking about it. I couldn't stop researching it. And I even had, to know for myself if they were real. And with that said, the journeys I had, it was all a bunch of paranormal stuff. Like maybe 1/3 biological, maybe even down to like 1/5 biological. But anytime I was in the field experiencing them, something otherworldly was happening. And I want to shy away from the word paranormal. I think if we don't understand maybe how creatures can move in nature, we ascribe that word to it. But they were definitely a higher intelligence, something that you knew, that I knew right away, was smarter than me. It had control of the situation. It knew where I was going. It knew where I'd been. They leave gifts in places like your home after you've been in the forest with them. There's the, what they call, I think it's like the follower effect, something like that. The hitchhiker. I experienced that right away. I started having, right after I went to Montana, I lived in California, I started having stuff happen around my house. Like tree branches stuck into the ground, just in random places on my property. Like you come home and there's a tree branch, but never happened before. The best one was they used to like to play with my wood pile. So I had a wood stove and I had a wood pile where I would get to cut wood. And like one day I found something had woven this beautiful gold string all through my wood. And one day I came out there and a piece, my chopping block, which I couldn't really move, it was a big round piece of redwood, and it was like, it would be a task for me to move it by myself because it was so big it was awkward. Like one day I came out and it was on top of my wood pile at my home. There's so many of these stories that I was hesitant to share, like I said, because there is a desire to keep on the side of credibility and to keep the knowledge coming, but in doses, so that we don't miss out on really, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, like throwing away the whole idea about Bigfoot just because someone says they have paranormal experiences. And that's what we've done a lot. Matter of fact, I really had intended to write a book. And with all my stories and then all my ideas. And I came up with this thesis. And I thought I was so clever about this thesis. What it was is that Bigfoot, it doesn't matter if Bigfoot's real or not. The challenge with Bigfoot is our belief system. It's our belief systems that keep us away from knowing Bigfoot. And so, hello. Sorry, obviously I have a stellar jay out my window right now. Anyway, just talking away. Wow. Anyway,
where is he going nuts at? What direction?
I thought he like fell into the creek for a second.
Yeah, at one point there was a close call. Yeah.
What do you need?
City, Sonya, and we heard plans, it'd be no big deal.
Oh!
Here I thought I had this thing. I was going to write this whole book about belief systems and what can change and alter them and what information really scientifically substantiates Bigfoot. And I just had this whole thing worked out. And then I bought, sometimes I go backwards in my research. I had never read Grover Krantz. And I thought at this point in my journey, I should probably read his book. Well, that was his thesis. When you open it up, he says, basically, the problem with Sasquatch is not if it's real or not. It's that whether we just believe or not. Anyway, so after that, I was like, well, so that's why that book was written 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And so we still haven't gotten beyond the idea that it really is our belief systems that are holding us back because the science information is there. And, and the paranormal seems to make it more elusive for people to really want to believe. But like I said, the paranormal experiences are the ones I had the most. I have been given gifts. Even today, I had earlier this afternoon, I'd been talking about the color purple and its significance. And Jill brought me a gift of a crystal from a very special place that almost looks like a Bigfoot. And she had, of course, wrapped it in purple cloth. So sometimes these things seem like coincidence, but they're not. It's just simply not a coincidence. The world of Bigfoot is mostly paranormal. Like I said, I've experienced gifts. They seem to know where I am. One time when I was in the field with Mike Patterson, I love to leave Sasquatch crystals. And I've explained before why I like to do that, because it's something that you hold, you have your energy on it, you have your smell on it. And I think if I was a Sasquatch, I might find a pretty polished rock of something of interest and beauty. Anyway, and then it's also not litter. If it's in the forest, it basically is a rock. It belongs in the forest. It's where it came from. So I like leaving them. And one time when I flew out to Toronto to meet Mike, one of my crystals shattered in the underneath. I had it stowed underneath. And so something about the pressure it didn't like, and it shattered. And I hadn't even mentioned to Mike about it. But when I got in the forest, I decided to take that broken crystal and leave it there just because it was broken and I had no use for it. We get back to Toronto and Mike is going through his gear and he sees the broken crystal and he says, "Hey, did you still want your broken crystal?" And I left it in the forest. He didn't know that. But yet someone gave it back. Something put it in his camera bag. Mike knew about the broken crystal, but he didn't go with me that morning on a walk. He did not see where I left that crystal. Nobody did. Nobody was around me. And so things like that continually, what was that? Like, how did that broken crystal get inside his camera bag and come home with me? So things like that, like, and I know that a lot of people talk about these things as well, and I'm happy to hear that more people are opening up to this side of Sasquatch, but that is really how it is. And in A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, I share with the audience the hearts that I found and were given. I left a heart in a tree, a crystal, and for 6 weeks and nothing happened, so I brought it back home. And the next morning on my doorstep was a naturally occurring rock shaped like a heart that was identical in size. Sometimes they leave you treats, and this is more physical, but there are some of us who have experienced Sasquatch leaving us meat, and I had them leave me a deer once, and that was pretty interesting, a little bit on the sad side, but nevertheless, these things happen. The first time when I was in Montana, in David Paulides' The Hunted, there's a scene where the old gentleman is taken. The biggest point of that, or the highlight of that movie, talking about this older gentleman who just sat on a rock and disappeared. But what all the hunters said is that they heard a loud crack, just like a lightning strike crack. All four of the hunters heard that the day he disappeared. Well, my very first encounter was preceded with 5 large cracks, and one was about 2 football fields away from me. I hear this large crack, and I look at my colleague and he says, "Oh, that's an elk. He's just breaking a branch over there." And then another crack, and he's like, "Yeah, that's just a bull elk." And then another crack, and he's like, raises an eyebrow, and then right behind me, crack. These were not quiet little crack creak. They were loud, like mini lightning strikes, just crack. And my colleague just looked at me and said, "Are you ready to confront?" And of course, this is my first time out ever in the forest. I still wasn't even a believer in Bigfoot. You know, I was out trying to convince myself. And but then I just said, "Yeah, I mean, what else did I come here for if I'm not going to confront?" So I walked into the tree line, and I didn't see or hear anything. But what was that crack? What was that? And then we left that area. We went back to the ATV we were on, and that's when I had this amazing, beautiful 20-minute encounter where there were vocalizations, there were branch breaks, there were more loud snaps, there were the noise that they make when they hit their chest. Some people have heard that noise. There was that noise. And then at some point at the end of the day, after I kind of followed this noise around a little bit, and I was a little concerned because, you know, still I'm in the forest by myself, my colleagues by the ATV. I'm in the tree line playing with something that I don't even have a visual of. I don't even know what it is. And part of me still doesn't even believe in it, right? So I keep playing, and we decide I stopped. I just kind of felt a little scared. And I said, "You need to come to me. I'm not moving forward." And then everything stopped, and I felt it. Like even the forest just went silent. Like you could tell that the energy had left the room. And So my colleague and I decided to go back. It was sundown anyway, it was getting late, and then come back the next day. And the next day we went out to the same spot and had interactions right away as soon as we got there. We had snap, pop, where are you? I would listen, I'd hear it over here, I'd hear it over here, and I'd run over here. But I never got the visual. Like, I would hear sounds, and I knew something was playing with me, but I never actually physically saw it. And then the day went by. I did the same thing where I sat down and said, you need to come to me. And then the energy just kind of vanished. And so we had lunch. We went on a hike. We came back, and we were just about to leave when the noises started to happen again. The clicks, the pops. And I grabbed an apple, and I ran out into the forest to the noise, where the noise was. And now I was so enthralled and curious that I didn't even care. I was like, what is going on? So I explained to whatever was around me that it could eat, and of course, assuming it was a Sasquatch, assuming that it was a Sasquatch. I explained to it how it could eat an apple, and it would be good for it, they'd like it. And then I asked, where do you want me to put this apple? And that's something I started to do right off. I would ask for phenomena. I would ask, where are you? And I would hear a sound. Can you come closer? No sound. It would just, I would always ask and interact with whatever was there. And so I put the apple up there. But before that, I said, where do you want this apple? Show me where you want me to put this apple. And so then it was dead silent in the trees, beautiful day, no wind. And I look over about 25 feet to my left, kind of a kitty corner for me. And I see these 3 trees just start making this really weird moving motion. And I'm like, okay, over there. So I ran over to that tree, and I jumped up on this log, and I staked the apple, and I heard this long, grovelly growl coming from my right, and in a very dense part of the forest I couldn't see in there. And it was amazing. It sounded like, and it was really long and grovelly, and obviously I can't do it exactly, but what was so poignant about it is that the vocalization was punctuated with a question mark. And so I asked it again. Then I got really excited. I said, where are you? Who are you? Why don't you come out? Can I see you? Why are you hiding? Like, we've been doing this for 2 or 3 days now, going back and forth. And the truth was, it was sundown again, and I had to leave. My airplane was leaving the next morning. So we had to go break down camp. And this was my first journey out, mind you, as a little bit naive, knowing the extent of what was going on, and also not understanding it. But nevertheless, before I left, it made that grovelly sound. And then right when I was about to leave, it did it again. And if you really want to hear what it sounded like, Google Coco purring. There is a small video of Coco the gorilla purring. A lot of people don't realize that gorillas purr, and that's what it sounded like. So you can hear the vocalization. It was identical to that. And so, but I have to leave that night, and we go home and whatever. But that was the first experience where, like I said, it was already paranormal because something's obviously walking around me and I can't see it. And it's leading me with its noises back into the forest. It's kind of having a vocalization here, then here, then here. but also pulling me away from my colleague. And I do think it could be perhaps that my colleague was carrying a gun. And so now hindsight would say that they probably didn't want anything to do with that they were kept hidden because of that. But that's just my very first experience. And then I had the hitchhiker. I had so many things happen at home. My wood being played with, the gifts that I would find on my door. I would sometimes have entrails on my door, and a cat didn't leave those. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. So I got those kinds of gifts. And, oh, again, the tree branches being stuck into the ground. So most people who have been in the forest with me know, or been out looking for Sasquatch, know that I like to do a prayer, a meditation, and sometimes a dance in the woods at night, just to celebrate the beauty of the earth, is really what it is. And I decided that I would do this when I would go out with Sasquatch, to just show him something of beauty. I fear that what they do know of us over the last several hundred years on this continent would not be necessarily so sweet. The people that came here, the first people that landed here, not First Nations, the first Europeans, they killed 2 million wolves. And they went on to kill 7 million bison. And I think if you had a gentle human-like species that was nocturnal and was witnessing this from afar, it would kind of make them not so much want to interact with us. And plus, it would have been the first time they heard guns, right? And that noise. I can't imagine the noise from the gunfire, how it shaped or it changed the landscape, the peace and the tranquility of this nation. So that would have been something to scare them off. So I decided really early on, even my first trip in Montana, I did a little dance outside at night for them. And that kind of grew into just kind of a beautiful ceremony for me. It's a simple prayer. It's not witchcraft. It's nothing like that. I sit down with myself and I just tell the earth, thank you for its beauty. And I just keep saying it over and over again. Just thank you. And so I go into a place of reverence, and I think I was hoping that might attract them. Like they'd see somebody in the forest in reverence at night. And so the first time I really, really did this for Sasquatch was with Randy Brisson. And we went into his territory. I picked a beautiful little space, kind of a circle of cedar trees. And it was so dark that night that you couldn't see your hand. Like when Randy and I walked out, we held hands because it was just so black, so dark. So I set my little stuff up, I set my music up, and as soon as I turned and went to start, I heard 2 footsteps and a grunt. I heard something sit down. Boom, boom. And my eyes got really big, and I turned to Randy, and I'm like, and then I looked at my knees, and my knees were shaking. And then I looked ahead where the noise came from, and then I just did it. I said, you know what, Sonya? You came here to share a gift. You are not running. You are not going to do this. You're going to quiet everything down and do what you came here to do. No matter if he runs out of the bush and takes your head off, it doesn't matter. Whatever's over there, this is what I came to do, and I'm going to do it. So I went into that high state of prayer for probably about 40 minutes. And when I was done, I didn't expect anything. This was never a give to get. It was never, I'm giving something to get something from them. I just hope it would attract them. And when I was done, Randy said that 2 more showed up. He heard 2 more show up. But also, we're in the forest at night, in the darkest of woods. Randy was eager to get out. And I wasn't. I kind of wanted to wait it out for a minute just to see if anything happened. And then all of a sudden I realized, Sonya, you shouldn't dismiss someone who was born and raised in these forests. You're listening, the man is telling you it's time to go. It's time to go. So just as soon as I let go and I turned around to grab all my things, of course, to leave no trace, to grab everything that I'd brought there, all of a sudden, the sky opened up and the forest opened up, and there were 13 vocalizations, and they just were on top of the trees, flowing over it, like so loud and so beautiful. And I listened to them like, Randy, what is that? And he's like, oh, Sonya, they like what you did. They like what you did. So what I heard was, now mind you, as you can tell, I'm a little bit ill right now and my breath capacity is short. I'm going to make the little sound, but I want you to know I'm making this much of it. It was really like this long. So the sound went like this. The call went, ooh. But just imagine that being like for like 12 seconds almost, just so long. And they did that 13 times. And what's crazy about that is I had my voice recorder on and you could hear Randy and I talking, but whatever that wasn't going to be recorded. It didn't show up to being shocked. But that was one of the most beautiful things that's actually ever happened to me, and one of the most beautiful things to ever happen to me in the forest. It was so like angelic. I don't know. And Randy says it was Sasquatch and I believe him. I don't know exactly because obviously I haven't seen one, but that was like the most beautiful thing. And I progressed. Like, that was probably maybe only the third ceremony I'd ever done, a prayer like that in the woods. And I continued to do that. And each time I would do that, something beautiful would happen, especially a lot to do with blue lights. And this also has to do with another story with Randy, which I'll share in just a second. But a lot of times when I would do that prayer, these like blue lights, like almost like, imagine sitting in the dark forest at night and seeing effervescence on trees, but it would be a soft blue. I said we'd be out there on the next Tuesday, and we went. And right when we got there, Randy and I was setting up, and Randy and I both heard through the trees this music. Now, I know, and Randy knew too, that could have been someone on a boat on the lake down below, and we all know how sound can filter through the forest. I get that. But the truth is Randy said to me, it sounds like your music, like what you did last week. And I go, I know, it does sound like my music. And then I went ahead and did the prayer, but we were just met with that as soon as we got in the forest. Nothing else happened on that trip, on that experience, but just that, like walking into the forest and then hear doo 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 doo, like what? Just again, so magical. And then another time speaking of blue lights, right one of the first times I went into the woods with Randy, we went at night. There was this, we were on this hill. The hill went down to a small lake, and on the right hand side here was a marsh. And we got up to the top of the hill at night. I didn't know it was a marsh down there. I hadn't been in this area. And we get up the top of the hill, and there are all these blue lights down there. And I told Randy, those were campers. And he's like, Sonya, I've been living here my whole life. That's a marsh. Nobody can camp down there. I'm like, oh no, those are campers. Those are people camping. Like, I don't know what all those lights are. And he said, no. He's laughing at me. And then finally, all of a sudden, one of the blue lights would just like pick up and take off and disappear into the sky. And another blue light take off and disappear into the sky. And then I happily said, we need to leave now. And Randy started laughing, saying, why? And I said, well, I signed up for Bigfoot, but I didn't sign up for aliens. So we're leaving. And we're laughing, but I left. It felt a little scary for me. I'm being indoctrinated about how terrible aliens are through Hollywood, for sure. I was like, no, I'm not doing aliens. But going back to that space, the reality is what were the blue lights? And they were blue like balls, and they were not small. And they were just coming from this area and then just shooting off and disappearing. It was quite beautiful. Quite beautiful. And then another time in that similar territory, all of these are probably in a mile radius of each other. Randy wanted to go up and check the power lines. And, you know, I know and feel that Sasquatch does not want to be photographed, but they do not mind being voice recorded. That's my experience. You can get all kinds of recordings of them. They don't mind audio. And so when I would hike, I would take my iPhone and put the voice recorder on and just let it run the whole time I was out there, hoping to pick up whatever. Well, we pull in about 10 p.m. into a parking lot next to the power lines. And we were going to hike the power lines that night. And I get out of the car, and I have all I need. Basically, my phone is in my hand, and I hadn't turned it on yet. Because I would leave my phone off if I wasn't using it. So my phone was off in my hand, getting out of the car, then walking to the back of the car. Just as I got to the back of the car and was headed over, meeting Randy this way, we were going to walk to the trailhead this way, and or the path, the trail. And all of a sudden, there was this light coming around my feet, and it appeared to be coming from my phone. And so this light was around my feet, and then there was the largest crack I have ever heard, and it was followed by a thump thump. And I mean, it was like crack so loud, and then this thump thump, and then this light, and somehow I thought I had to have turned my phone on. And so I was like, why did you turn your phone on? And I turned my phone on, and the face of it was black because it wasn't on. And I don't know what that light was around my feet, but that's the first and only time I ran. And I was laughing while I did it, but I just said, Randy, we're out of here. Run. Get in the car now. Because I did not understand what that light was at the base of my feet at all. And it was a whitish, bluish light. So I chickened out for sure. We got in the car, we were laughing, and we went home. And that crack and that thump, that was the biggest I've ever heard in any way, shape, or form. And it just terrified me. I was like, oh no, I don't know what's going on here, but we're leaving. And then we got in the car, and then we left. But I ran. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. But again, that whole aspect, all of this stuff is way more paranormal than it is physical. Nordegg and Mike Patterson's territory were definitely the most paranormal things I've ever experienced. When I was in the field with a colleague and up in a place called Nordig, Canada. It's out in the middle of nowhere. You know, the object of the game is to go out and hike all day and then hope that the Sasquatch energy follows you to your camp and you can, you know, engage there. So we did this a lot, several times. I had several trips in Nordig. But the craziest one was one night. My colleague's asleep at one end of the trailer, and I'm at the trailer with the bunks. And in the middle of the night, something hit the trailer. And it hit it so hard that all the blinds moved. Matter of fact, it was very odd. I was awoken to the trailer being hit and then seeing all the little mini blinds come in and then snap out really hard. And it was definitely, I was awake and listening, and all of a sudden I felt from the back end of this trailer, I felt an energy coming in and coming to the foot of my bed and then actually touching my feet. And then I said a mantra of protection for myself, and I fell back asleep. Just almost like if you'd like they say about UFO experiences, like I just fell back asleep. And the next morning I got up and I got up to start making my tea, got the tea kettle going, and then my colleague ran from the other side of the trailer to where I was making tea. And he said, did you feel what happened last night? Did you feel it? Did you know what happened? He was completely terrified and panicked. And I said, yeah, something hit the trailer. What was that? And then the next thing he said was, did it hold you down? Whatever it was held him down all night. It would not let him get up. And I just said no. I just fell back asleep. But we were supposed to be there for another like 3 or 4 more days. And we left that day. Later, I would ask another friend and colleague who I thought might have this kind of information and understand this logic. Like, what would make the blinds come in all at one time and then snap back like that? And they said that being picked up and dropped would create that. So I'll just leave that one there. That was one of the most paranormal and odd, and right out of a horror movie. My colleague literally ran to me saying, did they hold you down? So whatever that means, I don't know what was going on, but that really happened. The next most paranormal, of course, and I've said this a lot, and I'll stand by it, is that in all my experiences, Mike Patterson has the most paranormal activity. And in his, we were at a cabin by a lake, not in his exact territory, but away from it. And we had been doing some walking in his territory. And of course at night, and we were walking along the snowmobile trail where a hillside came down, and then the trail was here, and then it dropped off to the lake. Really beautiful part of the walk. And all of a sudden, something comes down the hillside towards us, and it goes trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. And I really thought it was a deer. I thought a deer was coming down the hill, saw us, planted, and decided to go the other way. It was definitely like a V shape. And Mike right away said, oh, that's Sasquatch, that's Sasquatch. And, you know, it could have been, but more logically, it seemed to me that that easily could have been a deer, and I couldn't say that that was a Sasquatch. Well, the next night we go to another part around the lake, and we're on this like level road. It's like 3 a.m, and we're just sitting there. It was a sliver of a moon, but somehow the forest, with the fog going through the trees, is still kind of lit up. And I'm sitting on my little space, and I'm just looking into the forest, and I'm just wanting to see something move. Something's gonna walk past here. Something, I just want to see it move. I want to see one. And from behind me, from my left, out of nowhere, came this trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. Now, when I say trash, people wonder, like, what is she talking about? That is really the sound of leaves being crunched on an October substrate in the woods in Canada. It's a crunch. Crunch, trash, trash, Anyway, but the difference is at this time, it was so fast and so large. And the boom behind me was like, like an elephant. Like the footsteps weren't really like an elephant, but that when it stomped behind me to stop, I didn't know what it was. And when it was coming at me so fast with the trash, 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 it came at me so fast. I'm sitting like this. My body didn't have time to move forward. Like something's running at you. It's running right towards you. And it's moving so fast. I couldn't cogitate what was happening enough to make me lean forward or to even look back or be afraid. It was over before I could even think about moving. And then the scariest part of it all was the very last little trash, because what I could garner is that from being right behind me, and that last trash was to tell me, look how far I can move and how fast and how delicately and how much space. Like this came up from behind me like in 100 yards, and that went out that way like not 100 yards, but I don't know, a good distance, maybe, let's say, 2 swimming pools. That's right, this came up behind me from 100 yards from this side, but when it did its last trash, it was at least at almost 300. It was so far out there, and I felt like it just put its foot down to let me know, and this is how far I am away from you. Trash. Goodbye. Well, I was stunned, completely overtaken and stunned at what had just happened. And all I kept saying over and over again was this colleague of mine was right. And I just kept saying it. I was kind of doing that thing like something just happened, like something was really scary that just happened. And I'm kind of going, my colleague was right. My colleague was right. Mike said, what was he right about? And I said that if it wanted me, it could pick me up and take me, and you'd never find me. And I never really had that land. Some people can say that to you. Like if you move to California, you might have an earthquake. And then you're like, okay, whatever. And then you go to California and you experience your first earthquake. And you're like, okay, I'm going back to New Jersey. Like, no, thank you. I'm not about this. Well, and that's kind of how when my other colleague would say, if they catch you and run off with you, I can't track it. I can't kill it. You'll be gone. Do you realize this? And I felt like he kept trying to scare me. But I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. That could happen. But in that moment, when this experience, I realized fully that he was right. Now, I'm not saying that they're scary and they meant to scare me or anything like that. It's just kind of the realization, a sobering moment, like, oh, this thing is big, fast, and it came out of nowhere and it left into nowhere. And I don't even know what it was. I have no clue what happened. And so eventually I calmed down. Mike was like, I'm really impressed, Sonya. Most people would be running to the cabin. And I just remember when he said that to me, I'm like, run from that? Like, you think you can outrun that? Like, what crazy person just has that happen to them and tries to run? And I go, besides, you don't run from a predator. And when I use that word, again, I don't mean that Sasquatch is a predator in the sense to humans, but it eats meat. So it's a predator. You don't run from a predator. So I was just like, we're just, exactly what's happening is we're going to sit here for 15 minutes. And I'm not going to let it know that I'm scared and that I'm freaking out. And it's not going to hear me decompress. We're just going to sit here. And then we'll walk back to the cabin. And then I'm going to decompress. And we'll probably be up all night. And you're going to see me spaz out. So let's just be calm right now. So we did. We walked back to the cabin. And I don't like a lot of unnatural light. And so I lit candles in the whole cabin. And that's just me normally. That's how my house is. I like things very low lit at night. And I usually like candlelight. And so I lit these candles. I had 4 of them different places in the house. 1 in the bathroom, 3 in the kitchen. And then on the dining room table, there were a set of 5 of those battery candles sitting there. And then I set 2 more out. Well, we sat down and we decompressed. And we just talked about everything Bigfoot. And just decompressed from that experience and tried to find just back to some sort of rationale for what just happened. And at some point, it became really, really late, of course. It was already 3 a.m. It was time for us to go to bed. But right before that, all of a sudden, all of the light in the house went out, including the battery candles. And how I experienced it, again, because I am an empath, what I experienced empathically was it felt like this big, massive hand came into the cabin and pulled all the light out with it. And that it wanted us to know that it was leaving. But here's where it gets really interesting. I went back and relit the candles. I had to turn on and off the battery candles. They came back on. There had always been this soft glow in the corner in the living room. And so I went over to the corner and I couldn't figure out what would make that soft glow. And I took the lamp and turned it on, and it wasn't the lamp. Plus I knew I didn't turn any lights on. And same thing, Mike thought I had turned a lamp on in the living room, and I thought he had. But that yellow glow was not part of the lighting situation of the house. And there had been a yellow glow the whole time I was decompressing. So then I realized the next day that the 2 events were related, meaning the first trash, the one that I thought was a deer, and what I believe happened is that was a Sasquatch. And when I dismissed it as being a deer, it came back the next night to show me that, little miss, I am not a deer. And the reason I believe that is because the patterning of the sound was identical. The first night, it was trash, boom, trash. And then the second night was identical patterning. So, and, the light left the room. Something intelligent was watching us, and it knew if it blew out the candles, we could have chalked it up to whatever. But taking the battery light and then having that soft glow be gone whatever it was actually wanted us to know that we had been, something had bared witness to my reaction. So that really, like I said, that one was, you know, you can't get more Hollywood paranormal than that. But that's exactly what happened. It's exactly the truth. Matter of fact, I was so shaken up that I went to, what was that thing we had back then? Oh, before all this big social media. What was it? Skype. I went to Skype and I made a video for my best friend Amber, and I sent it to her, telling her that if something did happen to me, that, you know, Mike would not be responsible, that there was something in this forest that was much bigger, had much more control than either one of us. And I thought to myself, the last thing I wanted was to go missing with anybody, you know, looking for Bigfoot, because they're like, especially if, quote, a Bigfoot was responsible. Again, I don't believe that, but necessarily if someone disappeared after an encounter, how do you explain that to authorities? You can't explain that. You can't explain it to anybody. Like, somebody's life is probably ruined, you know? So I was so shaken by the experience. I sent her a video, and the video, Mike has it. I've never let him play it, but I think I do look terrified. I'm definitely coming from a what the heck just happened last night space. It was the first time that I really, really soberly thought about being around them and their activity, knowing that even though I believe in my heart they're not going to hurt anyone or anyone, I don't believe that, but the capability is definitely there. I think a lot of it does have to, like so what I think researchers can look for, and instead of just trying necessarily to find, you know, we know the geographical areas. Definitely go into the forest. Definitely go into a cedar forest. But also, I think what really happens is that Sasquatch do pick us, and they pick us by our consciousness, like where we are in our consciousness. If we pose a threat, if we are, you know, somehow deeply irreverent as a human. I've had colleagues where I've been out in the forest with them, and I know for a fact that the Sasquatch don't like them, because when the Sasquatch are around them, they're aggressive. And I've never had them be aggressive before, except for this one colleague where they have been like rock throwing, tree pushing, that kind of thing. So there are geographical spots you can go that would enhance your probability. But I also think most importantly is, where is your consciousness? What are you thinking about? Are you listening to your surroundings? Are you, are you so like enthralled to see them that you're not just listening and feeling and letting whatever come to you, as opposed to projecting out into the space that you're there to find Bigfoot, So, yeah, I mean, I think there are different areas anywhere in a cedar forest. And as I've been as is coming to light, they live at high altitudes. So high altitudes are something if you can handle it. But they also like cedar forests. I think the people that disbelieve really just need to know that it's true, that there is something in our forests, and that there are probably many other things in our forest. And, we should take more learnings from First Nations people, and Native Americans, who will tell you the things that are in that forest. And mostly when they talk about Bigfoot, for the most part, I've heard that it's pretty good, but 30%, maybe not. But also, there are other things in our forest. And I won't say I've experienced them per se, but I will say I have been in forest that has dark energy. And you already know there's a foreboding there for some reason. And so not everything in the forest at night is just like la 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 foo foo, Like the forest at night is a different place than we know, that we're privy to. And I think it's like all of our fairy tales tell us if we don't believe in fairies, we won't see them. If you don't believe in Santa, then you won't see him. If you don't believe in this, then you won't see him. Well, the reason that comes from, that's what I'm saying about consciousness. If you shift your consciousness, then more things can show up in your experience. And that's all I did, really, ultimately, is my consciousness was shifted into a way that all of a sudden I now believed in Bigfoot. And then my whole world changed. And I have so much evidence for it, so much physical, scientific, cultural myths, geographies, ecologies. You can figure out what foods they eat, but you also know that they can make sounds like glass breaking in your backyard. And what is that about? And a lot of researchers have experienced this. Matter of fact, Ron Moorhead experiences numerous times where he thought his camp was being ransacked because of sounds of metal, crashing metal, things sounding like they were breaking. And when they wake up in the morning, their campsite was fine. So they're still shrouded in a lot of mystery, but I do think ultimately your consciousness needs to allow the space for this phenomena to arise. What Sasquatch taught me is deeply personal in the sense that, the most important thing, and I don't know, this may sound, self-absorbed or whatever, but the truth is I didn't know how courageous I was until I started looking for Sasquatch. Like, I go into the forest at night and I confront. And I know a lot of people who go in the forest at night and hear a bump and run. And like I said earlier, like I've said before with Randy, that one time I ran, we're laughing about me running, but it was the only time. I've also been shot with infrasound, and, that left me sick for weeks. And that was after a Sasquatch encounter. And I still go back in the forest. Matter of fact, the next day following that interaction where, they thudded behind me so loud and terrified me, like I got up the next morning and said, take me to where they are. I want to go to where they are. I want to go sit there at night. Where do you think they really, where they come from and where? And so we did that. We went the next night in the middle of the night, and another paranormal thing happened. Like, we were sitting there on a log and just listening to the woods, and I literally felt something start touching my ear. But then I was like, am I imagining this? Like, what is happening here? And it literally, something was touching my ear. And then when I got up to leave, I walked a little bit ahead of Mike, and something grabbed the back of my clothes and pulled me back, like as a joke. And I actually believed it was Mike. But when I turned around and looked at him, he was still putting some stuff away in his backpack. And so, but the thing is I went into that territory, like as spooked as I was that night before, like there's some kind of courage to just face it again. Like, just face it again. Like, you're terrified and face it again. So it taught me a lot about my own courage. And then, let's face it, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, is a gateway cryptid. Because once you accept Sasquatch, then all of a sudden, many other cryptids start to come to play, and they make just as much sense as Sasquatch was. Like, for instance, there's just as enough evidence historically, culturally, not necessarily biological, but historically, culturally, and worldwide, a global belief in dragons. Like, yeah, we don't get dragon footprints, but why does every culture believe in dragons, just like every culture has a Bigfoot? They have something that lives in the wood, this master of the forest. It may take on a little different shape. The morphology may be different, but there's this man-like creature in the woods. Also, the Native Americans believe in the dogman, which, if you wanted to say the European equivalent, would be the werewolf. And so this half man, half wolf thing actually permeates all kinds of different cultures. So once you start looking at Bigfoot, unfortunately, you get to look at all the rest and start to accept that our reality, what we've been taught, is probably the least amount of truth about our reality. And it continues every day. I really believe that so many of the things that we were told were not real are really real. And the things that we've been told are real, like we've been told Santa Claus is real. Sorry, kids. We've been told things about holidays that are real, that are not real. And I also think that kind of disappoints us. That does rob us of magic, because what we once believed was magical, we grew up to find out was nothing more than a thing that you do. And so it overshadows these other things. I mean, how many things? Every culture has UFOs. I mean, you have UFO paintings in caves. Like Aboriginals 2,000 years ago doing cave paintings that clearly are an alien. The Nazca Lions, clearly, they have one that's clearly an alien. The threads that run through, you just have to start looking at everything. And so Sasquatch definitely opened my mind. And then on a very personal note again, I've loved this process. Being engaged in Sasquatch research changed my life for the most magical experiences, and it really, it's in my heart. It's not something that is a head thing. It's a heart and passion thing. And that's kind of surprising, right? You want to go out in the forest and be Jane Goodall, and you come back out, and really what's happened is your heart is in love with this supposed mythical beast. And I do love it. I love everything about it. So it really altered me as a person. There's no doubt. Because once, like I said, 2007, watching a TV show, 2024, I'm still sitting here, getting close to the end. I'm still talking about Bigfoot.